Okay, we are live right now.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I think we just wait for a minute so that people can join in.
Great.
So we already have some comments like waiting, and it's time up. Okay, I think people have joined in.
Yeah, it says something went wrong. I'm trying to look at it on my own Facebook. I'm not sure if it's still buffering or what. It just says they're having
Um,
trouble playing.
okay,
Oh, maybe. Okay, now it is. I just refreshed. I don't know how many people we have in here, but
yeah, you need to mute it and add a watch party so that it works out.
nope, we lost. Didn't catch his name.
Raj,
Raj. I'll share this as well.
I think we can start the session. So, Sam, sometimes I would go in our native language, so don't mistake.
Okay, no problem.
So, மக்களே, good evening. So, thanks எல்லாருமே டக்கு join பண்ணீங்க. Sorry for the delayed start. So, we have Sam from Washington, D.C. is a creative wedding photographer. ரொம்ப ஒரு டிஃப்ரெண்டான ஒரு ஃபோட்டோகிராஃபர். அவரோட ஸ்டைல் வந்து he started using prisms a lot. So, prisms தான் வந்துட்டு he created different varieties of photos and the other things. So, அவர் ப்ரொஃபைல் வந்து நிறைய பேர் ஃபாலோ பண்ணிட்டு இருப்பீங்க. We don't have to tell anything. ஸோ அவர்கிட்ட பிடிச்ச விஷயமே பாத்தீங்கன்னா அவரோட ப்ரொஃபைல்லே போட்டிருப்பாரு ஜீரோ அவார்ட்ஸ் அப்படின்ற ஒரு விஷயத்த போட்டிருப்பாரு. ஸோ இட் இஸ் சம்திங் ஹி இஸ் நாட் ரியலி வரிட் அபவுட் அவார்ட்ஸ். ப்ரொஃபைல் பிடிச்சிருக்கா என்ன புக் பண்ணிக்கோங்க அப்படின்ற மாதிரி ஒரு கேரக்டர். ஸோ வி தாட் வி கேன் கிவ் தி செஷன் டு ஹிம் அண்ட் just have his thoughts on wedding photography. So, Sam, we will give the session to you. I just gave a small intro in Tamil about
Perfect.
that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to share, whatever I can with my time. It's been like everybody else, a roller coaster. I'm coming from the Washington, D.C. area. So right now, at least related to, current events, things are looking a little more up here. I've actually just this past weekend photographed 2 elopements. So a lot of my wedding clients are starting to, postpone the big group party and do something more legal and intimate now, so that they don't have to wait on being legally married, and maybe they can start moving in and all that kind of stuff with their lives. So I've actually been sort of busier than I thought I would be, but my weekdays I'm still happy to tune in and do stuff like this. I think I have access to all the comments, so as I get going, if anybody wants to ask a question or interrupt me or anything like that, let me know if you can't hear me suddenly or anything like that. I should be able to see all the comments coming along here. My plan is to just kind of share my desktop screen in a few minutes and just talk through sort of some deconstructions of my wedding photos. And I did hear I didn't understand all of the intro, but I definitely caught the, aspect about the no awards thing. And, that's not something that I try and speak too loudly about in the industry, because, a lot of people are very proud of their awards and regularly participate in contests and try and improve themselves as photographers through awards. And that's totally valid. That's something that, if it works for you, that's great. But I built my entire wedding business, the first 3 or 4 years, having no real even sense that awards existed. And it just made sense to me that, like, if I can work 3 or 4 years with wedding clients, trusting me based on the merit and the quality of my work, why even put the extra energy into, holding myself in comparison to some industry standard and getting an award or not getting an award? In fact, many of my favorite photos would never win an award because, one, they're incredibly powerful moments that only have a lot of value to the client, and the client would know like the meaning and the value of the photo. Or two, it's totally weird and it just doesn't resonate with enough people. Like my more recent project on Instagram has just been slicing people's like bodies in halves with branches and sticks and stuff like that. That's totally weird. That's not going to be an award-winning thing. Maybe if I hit just the right execution in terms of concept and stuff, it could be seen as like an award-winning idea. But my favorite photos, my real creative images are meant as a client filter, if nothing else, just to get the right personalities through the door and booking me, so that when it comes time for me to work with them on the wedding day, everything, we understand each other to a degree, and it's just fun. Like there should be space in weddings to just experiment and have fun, with the heightened trade-off of it being like once in a lifetime. Like I love that challenge and the intensity that comes with shooting weddings and creating something new with that constraint. So awards have nothing to do with any of that. Like you can get caught up in that and it can be a good marketing tool for a little while, but anyway. So the other thing that I think about, and I'll see if I can share my screen, parts of my kind of workshop presentation. Let's see here. Let's make sure this works. Application window.
I was wondering about your new images, like the cutoff images. I was just seeing and like I was thinking, okay, this guy has invented something new right now.
Well, I'm not really totally ready to talk about that just yet, so don't get your hopes too high. I only just started doing those out of quarantine in the past couple weeks, but I'm pretty excited about it because I haven't really seen anything like that in the wedding industry. It's not a totally unique concept. I've seen it done in other like portrait things, but doing it in camera is quite the trick. And eventually I will talk about that, but I don't even have good reference or behind the scenes stuff to show and explain what's going on. But I do have other slides I can talk about for sure. Can you see my screen okay? Are you seeing my presentation here? Oop. You might have a delay, but I just want to make sure you guys are able to see this.
Yeah,
looks
we
like
can see
you
it.
are. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm going to hide that part. Okay, where did I want to start? Oh, geez. Bringing it back. So before we even get into like, here's a photo, here's how I made it type of stuff, I just want to talk about the inspiration, exactly what this slide shows, what I do to surround my life with images, or, it could be a still photo, could be a clip from a movie, it could be any visual type of thing that catches my attention. I am hyper aware whenever I'm out in the world. I try and be as sensitive as possible to just the visual stimulation. Like now, let me show you exactly what I mean. I've got a phone, simple iPhoto catalog of like 300 crappy snaps of just random stuff that, for whatever reason, me personally, it drew me in. And sometimes it's very obvious with like this cool light effect or this cool glass effect in this really old black and white portrait, this cool like rainbow effect. Sometimes it's a really obvious sort of concept or idea. Sometimes it's not obvious at all, and it really only makes sense to me and my brain. This is a really good example of that here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this picture of these two guys with this like stage lighting. They're up on a stage. This is a close-in crop. It's not a good photo as it is, as you see it, but I was really interested in how their shadows aligned, and where they overlapped with the stage lights, their shadows were like twice as dark. And it created this weird overlapping outline of their silhouettes that I thought was really interesting. Now, I just took a picture of two guys standing on a stage. And when I was going back and editing, I realized like, there's something to that. If I can get two bright, small, harsh lights against clients facing each other, I can play with their overlapping shadows in a way that might do something really cool. So that's just sort of like the start of how ideas like what I work on generally, how they form. That concept led to this photo during this couple's wedding, and I wasn't totally happy with my. This was just basically trying to like replicate exactly what I saw on that stage. It didn't really work out the way that I liked, just for this particular couple. Maybe it was the background, whatever. I didn't love it, but I did layer it in with a double exposure in camera to get another version of something that is totally sort of different when you just like look at it conceptually. But it started me down the path of getting to an endpoint of something I had never seen before. I didn't have a reference that looked anything like this, but having this as the starting point, this picture of these two guys shaking hands and being highly sensitive and aware to what was happening with the physics of the light, led to this kind of a photo stack thing that I had never seen at this point in my career before, which is kind of cool. That's often how these kinds of ideas play out. I never set out to try and replicate exactly what I'm seeing, or if I do technically try and replicate exactly what I'm seeing, I'm leaving the possibilities open for a new direction to be had with it. I don't try and just work hard like the entire time to make it exactly the same or consider it a failure. If I get something that's subtly different, I'm totally fine with that, or something extremely different. Here's another example of that playing out. The bottom right corner here, there's like a picture in a frame. And I think this was literally just in a restaurant somewhere. It wasn't like a museum or anything like that. I just was fascinated by these like silhouetted trees against like a bright cloudy sky or something like that. And within it, it's hard to tell from maybe your perspective. This like guy is in a suit silhouetted in a tree. And I thought, oh, that would be totally easy and able to be done as a double exposure in camera. All I need are black lines in one shot and then a well-lit subject in another shot. And this was months later, maybe a year later. I was out shooting a wedding in the winter, and a lot of the leaves had fallen off because it was cold out, and so there was just these silhouetted tree limbs, and it reminded me of this snapshot that I've had in my phone now for like 6 months, right? And it kind of gave me a direction and a little bit of guidance of where to start and then kind of take it from there. So this is a double exposure. Again, this black is actually a tree. It's a fairly straight tree. It's not very crooked or anything, so it could be hard to tell, but it's actually just a tree, and all this other stuff is all from that original first shot with the tree. And then I took the couple out later and photographed them just standing with a video light on them. If you can see my mouse hovering over this little spotty white section, that's actually the video light that's being held up lighting them. You don't see my second shooter holding the video light because she doesn't have any light on her, so she's not showing up through any of the frame, and boom, you get a double exposure that looks very different, but it was inspired and kind of set me down the path given this. So at the end of the day, the point is draw inspiration from everyday life. It doesn't have to be just other wedding photographers whose work you really love, or just other photographers in general. It can be any visual thing that you think is fascinating, given a motion, like in terms of like a gesture someone's making, like this woman throwing away her handkerchief. It could be a pose with these two kids. I love the way these two children are posed holding hands. Like I could easily see that translating into a fascinating couples portrait. And this is just a article from a magazine about something not related to weddings. So you just want to be really aware and sensitive to that stuff and keep a record of it. That was the big mistake I made for years, was thinking, oh yeah, I'll keep that in the back of my head for a long, long time. But it would eventually just escape me and it would never come back. So I have hundreds and hundreds of things that sometimes, eventually lead to something. Sometimes they don't. But the other thing is, I constantly hear with weddings in particular that people don't have the right time of day. The couples aren't giving them enough time on the wedding day for photographers to get creative and comfortable. That maybe they get the wrong client personality, that just aren't interested in doing anything new. That is a problem, and it's something you have to get more comfortable pushing up against as you go. But I try and never lose sight of the fact that there's potential everywhere. Typically, clients will do whatever you ask them to up to like a certain point. If you only have 5 minutes with them to do something creative, take that 5 minutes, right? Like do whatever you can and never lose sight of, yes, you might be stuck in a hotel room or a ballroom that looks kind of like any other hotel, or isn't. Maybe it's a venue you've shot at. a bunch of other times and like you're not seeing anything new, but there's always something new to be had in every corner, in every place. Even a white wall can turn into something amazing. I love this photo. This before, actually, it's not a before and after. It's the exact same moment in time. The photo on the left is from my second shooter, who shot within the same 1 or 2 seconds, probably. The bride picking up her dress, which I shot with this is my 85 millimeter 1.4. And in case anybody has questions about equipment, I almost always shoot with a 50 millimeter, 50 or a 24. That tends to be my go-to. But this shot in particular happened to be an 85. And I love what I was able to get out of this crazy, noisy, crowded room. She was just simply picking up her dress to go walk to start the dinner and the reception. And I got this mostly by accident, nice little isolating page turning effect moment with the bride that I thought was really beautiful and powerful. This is a venue that's popular in DC. This is the hallway that leads up to it. I shoot there a lot, all the time. And, this is the exact hallway that I made this photo in, which I love. And, I was setting out to create an image of a little bit more serious and just like, it's nighttime. This is a daytime reference shot, but this photo right here was actually taken at night. It was nighttime, so a little more, dramatic and dark and moody. So I had them for the majority of the time laying down a lot more serious. And that's where you want to be on your guard. When couples are a little bit more relaxed and serious, that's when I find they are most likely to burst out into laughter. So as a photographer, you might use the seriousness to slow down and pace yourself a little bit, but I am always ready on the trigger for something silly happening and just bursting into laughter. I said we were done with the photo, and technically we were, but I was still ready to take photos, even though, I said we were done. I trick couples all the time with that. Like, yeah, we're done. And then keep snapping secretly. She started to do a sit up to try and get up and couldn't do it because her dress was too tight and she just had dinner and she fell right back down. And that just made them both start laughing. And that made the shot, whatever I was going for in terms of a tricky, serious, like fine art composition with the mirror and the reflection and them laying down, like that was all out the window once you get a couple who's genuinely just belly laughing. Those kinds of images I look out for constantly, and creativity will go right out the window when couples are showing their true colors sometimes. But it's twice as good when you can marry something really, really creative with an expression and an emotion that's truly natural. Kind of like this. Now, this isn't quite as big of a belly laugh as that bride I showed you in the previous photo, but this is them just naturally kind of giggling because of, I don't know, some joke I made or I can't remember. But the spot they were standing for this shot is right here. Hopefully that's showing up okay. It's a little dark. This is an iPhone picture. This is before iPhones took decent night shots. Yeah, this is exactly where they were standing. Now, this is when I came back to this venue maybe 4 months later or something, like maybe a year later, I can't remember. But obviously this is snow that's falling, just starting to fall on the couple, and it wasn't snowing in this shot, but they're standing in the exact same spot as this image here, and they're being lit with the video light. Snow is falling. A little bit of snow is caught on the front element, like a little droplet of water or snow is on the front element of my lens, and I am shining an iPhone light, just like this iPhone, right into. You guys can still see me on the video, right? Thumbs up if you can still see me on the video. And I just want to make sure you can you see me and the screen sharing?
Yeah, Sam, we can see.
Just making sure. Cool. So this is, if you can imagine, snow is falling. I have a video light being held over my right shoulder, lighting them. And then there's a little bit of a droplet of water, just a small drop right on the front. And I'm just holding my light in front of my lens like this, my iPhone light, shining it right in to create that flare. And oftentimes I will purposely put a tad of water drops on the very front element of my lens. I don't know how well it works with a filter. I don't use front protective filters. I just use the exposed element. And this image in particular was made when I shot Nikon. This is probably the 58 1.4. Maybe it was a 50 Sigma. But anyway, that's what's going on in the shot. And just to show you even further how many different looks you can get out of a single space, this image was made in this spot, and that's the exact same spot that I made this photo. Same venue. That's the same couple. It's exactly, maybe 10 minutes I had with them, if not less, to actually go through a couple different iterations of ideas. So it's pretty interesting. And then I want to talk about this photo as well. Usually I like to ask people in the comments, like, if they have ideas about how this was made. A lot of people think this sort of concept, especially when I first shared it, I think I did this around 2012, 2013. They thought it was just a simple like Photoshop of stitching two images together, but it's actually an in-camera double exposure. I've done a couple others of this and other kind of similar approaches since. But just to give you a sense of the space that we were in, it was just a simple green lawn. There was a beautiful view of the water behind the lawn and behind the bushes and stuff like that. But that's it. You're basically just on someone's grassy lawn. This is right outside next to the hotel. Putting your camera on the ground, not just for a photo like this, but that can just totally. Even after doing this 10 years, I've made over 2 million photos at this point in my career. I still have to remind myself, like, put your camera on the ground and see how it just totally changes perspective on the world, because the ground becomes like a nice kind of bokeh geometric shape. It's not obvious that it's grass, or it looks like cool, tall grass, even though it was very well cut. Like, it just changes your perspective on the world to just lay your camera down. And putting your camera on the ground can slow your brain down. I get very caught up. I fight this all the time where, I've got my camera, sometimes I've got a prism or something else, and I've got all these ideas floating around, and I'm trying to maintain conversation with the client and be personable and happy. And my brain's firing a million miles an hour, and so is my shutter. I'm just shooting. And I have no problem with just taking tons of photos, but I'm more concerned about slowing my thought process down to be a little more mindful and aware of the environment, so that I can push things 1 or 2 degrees, in terms of complication or consideration. And that's all you need. Once you can go a little bit further in depth in terms of like a complicated idea or like a creative concept you want to apply, that can lead to so many new things. This image is pretty complicated if you've never tried it or if you haven't seen it. But and depending on what camera you use, it may or not be possible to do in camera. A lot of the Sony bodies don't have in camera double exposure as a feature, which is one reason I don't shoot Sony. Like, I love double exposures. And this I made on a Nikon body, but you can totally use Nikon or Canon. The camera's sitting in the ground. It's actually a 24 millimeter lens. Aperture is probably, I don't know, f8 or something. It's a small enough aperture that if you hold like a black card, in my case, this was literally I think it was my passport, and I held it right up against the front of my lens, just like this. You need whatever aperture is small enough so that that line becomes just a straight defined line. And I'll just take a picture and show you. It's a little, I wish I had my 24 on, but let me just take a sample of exactly what I'm saying. I'll shoot out my window here. Good enough, I think. Okay. Oh, I have silent mode on. That's totally weird. So the idea is to get one image roughly like this. You'll have an even more clearly defined straight like line the wider you go in terms of focal length. This is a 50 millimeter, so it's not that wide. But half the image was blacked out straight down the middle, just like that, for the daytime shot where the groom is out. And then I left the camera on the ground in the exact same spot. This wasn't a crowded area. I didn't have to worry about somebody coming by and stealing it, but be careful. Don't come yelling to me if you leave your camera on the ground and, it gets stolen. So be sensible. But I left the camera on the ground, went and shot the reception with my backup camera, my other camera body, for a few hours, brought them back out. And now the sky had changed. We had a new cloud front coming in. Some stars were poking through. It was a totally different light. And I stood the bride and groom in the exact same spot. I had marked where they were standing with my tripod, actually, and some coins. And I didn't need my tripod. It was sitting, my camera's on the ground. And I took a second exposure shot with my passport on the other side of the frame, right down the middle. And as a reference point, you can use in live view, like the focus point as sort of a visual marker. Usually you have like a little black or white or even red square or rectangle for your focus point. That's what I was using as a visual marker to get the alignment right down the middle. And that's it. I took the bride side. The groom was still standing there for her shot as she was for his, but they're basically just reference points for placement. You can even see like where the line goes down the middle. Her dress is kind of crossing over to his side, and that's just because she was standing in the exact same spot for that. So anyway, that's it. It's an in-camera day-night double exposure, and I had this idea not because I just woke up one night after an inspirational dream and knew exactly what to do. No, I was listening to a podcast about Stanley Kubrick, the old director, amazing guy, and I'm not like a super fan. I like his movies that I've seen, but I was listening to a scene that they were shooting. I don't remember which film, but they wanted to do 2 shots at the same time on the same roll of film. It wasn't meant as a double exposure, but technically that's what it is. So what they did was they took the front element of their big video cameras and they gaffer taped up about half the shot. So it was just black and then only half of it was exposed. They loaded a roll of film, shot the scene, and then they reloaded the exact same roll of film from the beginning and inverted where the tape was marked. And on that same roll of film, they got 2 sections of it moving at the same time. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. You could easily block out one side and then the other and do all kinds of stuff. And my only thing was just realizing like a day-night aspect of it would be pretty cool. And so that's it. And I've tried that many, many other times and failed completely. It's a lot of different variables to balance, but it if you get it right, it can work. And it's kind of cool. I don't have another one in this slide, but I have, maybe I'll pull up my Instagram in a second. I did another one last year that actually was a little bit sloppier. You could see some of the light trails from where I lit the bride, because this is like a video light off camera in this shot. But I did one last year where you could actually see the video light because I had to be a little bit closer. I was using a different light and it wasn't as bright.
We have it in the posters, whatever we gave you. I think that's the image we designed the poster with.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So that one, the alignment wasn't quite as right. And I made the mistake of having them hold hands, which you don't want something that isn't exactly or really close to exactly the same crossing the threshold from one frame to the next. And I had them hold hands, which was kind of weird, but it still looked kind of neat. And it's so satisfying to have like a raw file to edit at the end of the day with this kind of technique. And of course you can have an idea for something and put it together, piece it together in Photoshop or whatever if you want. And there's totally space for that and that's fine. But I like having the constraint as much as possible of doing it in camera, not only because I get easier editing consistency if you're working with a raw file and it's just much easier along with the rest of your gallery to edit for consistent look, just tonally, right, with contrast and white balance and all of that, but also just having constraints peppered across your work, even if they're artificial constraints that you've put on your own brain to play games with yourself or whatever. That is truly a pathway toward creative problem solving. Oftentimes, the better you get as a photographer tends to be the less easy it is to get creative because you have a patterned way of doing things. You have a sense of your methods. And that leads toward kind of recreating a lot of what you've done before sometimes. So you have to, after a certain point, start to like create things that are, again, even if they're artificial constraints that like lock you into a set of problems that, you need to solve your way out of. That's why tying it back to dealing with clients that aren't willing to give you enough time, or venues that you've shot before, or venues that are not very inspirational or whatever, just take that as a challenge, make that your constraint, and just tackle that problem anyway. It's not always going to come out great, but that's the thing I try and do over and over and over. And I don't do a lot of preparation work with my wedding clients in terms of timeline guidance and stuff. I offer it up if they ask, but if they ask about like what time to do photos, blah, 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 I tend to lean toward whatever suits your day the most comfortably. Because if I shoot every single wedding in perfect light at sunset in the perfect spot, like that just leads toward my work sort of having the same circle of quality, unless I come up with other ways to sort of do this kind of thing. So hopefully that point was made clear. And at the end of the day, these are just my opinions on things. There's plenty of what I say that other people photographers would disagree with completely. It's just not how they see the world, and it's not how their brain thinks. It's not what motivates them, and that's totally fine. So I do have some more breakdowns. I know you mentioned prisming when you introduced me, and so I'm happy to talk about that a bit. I don't know if I brought my prism to my desk here, but here's a picture of what it looks like. It's a 6-inch piece of glass. Okay. Do we have any questions here? Should I take a break? Is there any? Let's see. I answered sort of the in-camera versus Photoshop. I think I kind of answered that already. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you've answered that already, so I think we can do that. You can go on to prisming, and I have a prism for you.
Nice. Right? There you go.
Yeah.
That looks right. Yeah, that looks totally fine. The big thing is having enough of a handle on it. I actually will take my prism. I've gone through a bunch at this point, but I'll put some black tape around the side of one, just a little bit enough so that I can put my fingers and hold it without getting it super fingerprinty and smudgy. So just add a little bit of duct tape or something like that. That way you hold it from a consistent side. So prisming came about because I actually played in a band. I played bass guitar in a band in college, and we were called Prisms. I'm not entirely sure where the original name came from, but we were Prisms, and there were no other bands called Prisms at the time. So we were like, all right, we'll do that. And I was searching Amazon for something I think related to us. That was back when I was trying to make it more in the, I was starting photography, but I was trying to make it professionally as an audio engineer, actually making records for bands and recording and all that. And I was sitting at my studio desk and found something on Amazon related to prisms, and just kind of discovered a science shop. People actually sell prisms now as a actual photography tool, but at the time it was meant to just for teachers to shine light through and teach about light refraction and the Pink Floyd album cover where you shine like a white light and you get this spectrum of rainbow. And it was a tool for teachers. So I bought one and played around with it. And I think originally my plan was to see if I could get a rainbow colored flare to hit my lens front element and get like a colorful flare or something, which didn't work at all. It doesn't even make sense. But after just having it sit on my desk for a couple months, I started to just play around with it, hold it right up to the front element of my lens, and realize I'm actually getting some kind of cool reflections and effects just by holding it right up against my lens. That's interesting. So I started where I recommend anybody starts with a new idea. If you're shooting weddings and you have a new creative concept, a new lens, a new camera, anything new, take the getting ready photos as the time to maybe experiment a little more, because you have your subject is generally just sitting in a chair, maybe have another camera body ready to capture moments and stuff from other family members, but you've got a subject sitting in a chair holding still. So that's a pretty good thing to kind of scenario to play around with and experiment. And that's what I did with prisming. And that's where I realized I still, even to this day, use the prism constantly for getting ready photos, because those rooms tend to be kind of messy. There's trash everywhere. In this particular example, the makeup artist, her hand and her face is right next to the bride all the time. And I got some pictures just composing and cropping the makeup artist out. But when I started to play with the prism, I really liked the effect of this, in camera, in front of lens, rainbow curve. And that's the other thing I love about the prism compared to any other glass tool. There are a lot of things now that exist. I think they're called fractal filters or something like that. The guy that actually made fractal filters emailed me before he launched his Kickstarter campaign to say like, hey, I really want to make these because I saw what you're doing with prisming. And I was like, yeah, go for it. He made some really cool, they're more like kaleidoscopy filters, which are neat, but they really kind of have one look to them. What's really cool about the prism versus any other sort of glass element I've come across is that it has the two extremes of kind of reflection that I can imagine. One is just a straightforward, simple reflection, and the other is a curved, bendy, sort of abstract, streaky rainbow reflection. It can oscillate between those two extremes. So you can rein it in when you need to and you want something a little more classic as far as the reflection goes, or you can like really ramp it. Like this is straightforward reflection from underneath, nothing too crazy. Or you can sort of hit the midpoint between creating, yes, a regular reflection and also like distorting and bending that reflection. You can create, or you can go like really crazy, like this one where it's just almost over the top. And it's sometimes easy to go a little too over the top with anything that you shoot through, especially the prism. So if you've never experimented or played with this kind of thing before, I usually recommend get it to where you think it looks really cool and then dial it back a little bit because your future self will thank you. It's so easy to be like, oh, look how awesome this is. And then a year later realize like, whoa, that I went way too heavy with, I think a lot of photographers see this in their editing. You think you're onto something amazing and a year later you look back and you're like, oh my God, everybody's green in all my pictures. What was I thinking? You don't want that same thing to happen with these kinds of tools that you're using. Dial it back to where it's, kind of a tasteful augmentation of what's occurring so that it doesn't overwhelm or detract too much from the, the intention, which is generally a portrait, right? You want the attention to go to the subject's face, not just be like all over the place. And then I normally shoot through the prism with a really wide aperture prime lens, like a 1.2 or a 1.4. That creates a really nice gradation, like a gradiated fall off between the prism reflection and then what's actually in the scene. But if you stop down to f8 or something smaller, you start to get these defined breaks in the lines of the prism sides, which can be really cool. It's just another sort of palette that you can choose to use through the prism if you want. But I tend to start wide open aperture, 24 or 50 millimeter are my go-to lenses. So the vast majority of my prism shots are those, and it works really, really well. It can be very effective. And I start to think about pulling the prism out when I've got like a darker background to layer the prism reflection against. So in this example, I don't have good behind like before and after, but this shot where you see the sky and everything being reflected by the prism was mostly just dark, like green forest. The sunlight was kind of stopping right where their couple was, and then there was just shade and darkness beyond them. So adding a layer of prism anywhere you have that kind of darkness, same with this. So this is a garage. We had the nice row of bright windows, but below the couple's waistline, all the spot where the prism reflection is sitting on top of is just dark. It's actually a lot of cars and dark shadow. And I was just prisming out the obviousness of the cars. And again, when you reflect in something bright in the prism on something dark in the actual frame, it really makes it pop in a way that I love. So that's just something to think about in terms of your environments. There's just so many different things you can do. One of my favorite photographers, Jeff Newsom, made this, which is so genius, but he basically did what was the Pink Floyd cover album. He had a rectangular shaped light source. He tried to explain it to me. I think I'm getting it right, but he had basically a flashlight shining through a rectangular cutout that matched the size of the prism. And so there was even light dispersion against the whole prism itself. And then that created a rainbow for the bride in the background there, which is just something I love. And the groom in this shot is a photographer himself who shoots with prisms. So it all kind of makes sense and ties together for them. And I love when a special effect or creative idea can tie back to being like particularly meaningful for that couple. That's always fantastic. So any questions about that? I don't want to jump over to the next thing too soon. Have I ever had clients who thought it was over the top and would have been happy with just normal pictures? Oh my gosh, all the time. Absolutely. So when it comes to finding the right clients for something like this, that's a balance you have to play. And that a lot of what a client's expectations are going to be align with what you show in your work the most often, right? So back in the time when I started to play with the prism and other creative concepts, that was probably around year 2 or 3 that I was shooting like weddings, at least almost professionally, like probably 20 a year at that point, maybe 30. And so I did have clients where the vast majority of my portfolio, I didn't have prisms in there. I didn't have any shots to show, and they'd hired me a year earlier anyway. So my portfolio looked very different. So yeah, I would, for those weddings where clients had booked me a year earlier before I'd even used the prism, I had none of that in my portfolio. I would absolutely lean in a little more into what I had been doing and then slowly pepper in literally just like 2 minutes with the prism. And if I got a cool shot, that I would share in my portfolio. I would make it like an identifying aspect of me as a photographer for future clients. And so I like added one prism shot to my portfolio where the rest of it looked pretty standard. Maybe there's 1 or 2 sort of creative fun ones, but there wasn't anything too out there. But then I would add a prism shot to kind of like, add that to the mix. The next wedding I shoot, if I get another prism shot or a double exposure, I'd add that to my portfolio. And slowly over time, my portfolio shifts the expectations along with the clients that are hiring me, and the attitudes and expectations of my clients were also slowly molding. And eventually you end up with a portfolio that's really well balanced between, hopefully, if you're doing it right, classic moments and super creative stuff. And that blend gets clients that hire you that appreciate what you do in terms of respecting and honoring like the legacy of their family and getting just genuine great wedding photos, but also taking some time to push something new for the world and exciting and new and unique for them in their wedding day. It's all about getting the right alignment of clients. You wouldn't want, same way with like maybe you find an editing preset that you just love, but it looks totally different than anything you've done before. You wouldn't want to completely start editing in that new way for all the clients that hired you based on a previous look, right? It needs to be sort of a slow transition. Usually it takes about a year, honestly, of like playing around with an idea. When it works, you share that a little more heavily on your social media or your website. And then those clients then that are hiring you now, expect that to see a little bit more of that in the full gallery. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. And again, sometimes for yourself too, you have to reflect and critique your own work and know when nobody is connecting with this. This is like way too weird. Like nobody wants to hire me if I do this thing. Yeah, you have to have a sensible approach to things, because at the end of the day, if you do this professionally, you have to hit that sweet spot of finding clients that want you to push creativity, but not be so weird that nobody's hiring you at all. That's a really important thing to not lose sight of. Here's an example of that, right? Like I actually did have, this is an in-camera effect. There are apps and like people can do this just like in post processing live with video on TikTok now. It's not that big a deal, but at the time it was pretty interesting to play around with. I hadn't seen it before in camera with photos, and I did this at a wedding and posted it, and a bride whose wedding was coming up the next week was like, yeah, I don't really like that. Are you doing that at every wedding now? And I was like, oh, totally okay. Like I understand, she had hired me a year earlier. Maybe she liked my prisming stuff and this just wasn't. So I try and make sure and let clients feel empowered to push back a little bit, as long as we're not totally off base and they're trying to control everything I do in my photography. I like getting feedback from them about their preferences, just in a general sense. And as a side note, as much as possible, I try and tell clients, yes, if you want to put together like an inspiration board or like work that you love from something, try and do that with just my work. Like if you're hiring me anyway, like go through my back catalog of blog posts or my Instagram or whatever, and try and like piece together 40 shots you love of mine. And that gives me a little bit of a direction. Don't put together 50 shots from like every photographer in the world and tell me to do something like that. It's just not going to work. But just to, in case nobody's played with this. Oh, let's see. I have a good question here. What's the percentage of creative works versus standard works? That's a tough balance. I would say it's across an entire wedding, the percentage is incredibly low. And I can pull up a full wedding and we can scroll through it. I do not shoot the entire wedding day ultra creative through prisms half the time, free lensing half the time, changing people in multiple colors. Part of that is just I don't have the mental headroom to do that all day. If you took an hour and a half to do that during getting ready photos and you were just full pedal to the metal creativity, you're going to be exhausted mentally by the time it's like toasts and the reception and all that. I mean, unless you have a higher, it's going to be different for everybody. But for me, I'm exhausted. So I actually stopped feeling bad about like, I try and do a fantastic job with just classic kind of wedding moments, getting ready, photographing toasts, reaction shots, really focusing on people's expressions more than the creative aspect of how I'm framing it or the lighting. And only when I have the couple with me, like they're looking at me, we've got 10 minutes or hopefully we've got more time. I would say the average I get at a wedding is about 20 minutes. Hopefully when I have that 20 minutes where it's just me and them, that is when it's full pedal to the metal. When it's couples photos, I can control the situation more. I can guide them into, I can direct them into a shot and do a lot more complicated creative things like these multi-layered color photos. Where this would be so difficult to do if it was just me trying to document somebody giving a toast, something like that. So it's almost 100% for the couples portraits together are super creative, depending on the couple and the vibe I'm getting from them. And then the rest of the day, I'd say maybe like 10 or 15% where I'm doing something interesting in the framing. A lot of times that has to do with just simple reflections or, maybe a flare or something like that. But that tends to be my comfort level in how I, strike that balance. You also can't lose sight that the wedding gallery, the full set of photos, though the emphasis should be the wedding couple and what they want and what their preferences are, like there's a lot more people interested in those images, and you want to appeal to a broad range of tastes so that mom likes the photos, that dad likes it, grandma, grandpa, like all those extended and a lot of times older family members still like themselves in the images and get excited. Because if you are so narrow in your perspective throughout in terms of like being a crazy creative person the entire day, you're likely to turn off a lot of those wider audiences that are going to see the full gallery. And that doesn't lead to as much word of mouth in terms of referrals for future work. And you want to strike those two balances. But again, and I do take occasional safe shots with the couple, don't get me wrong. But that is where the safe shots are on the back burner. I do those if I remember to, and I really try and push myself creatively when it's just the couple. So I tend to over answer questions. I'm just going to walk through this shot. I wish I had, I don't have the actual glass elements in this presentation, but this is shooting through 3 different glass filters, just like you would have a colored filter for your, as a lens protector or something like that. These are actually red, green, and blue filters, shooting 3 different shots in camera. You can just, instead of doing 2 exposures at a multiple exposure, you do 3. And because you're using a red and then a green and then a blue filter, it's basically creating isolated channels of color, if you want to think of it like layers in Photoshop or something. But in camera, when you do this, you have the individual raw files that look, the first one I shot through a red filter, second one I shot through a green filter, third one a blue. And if I'm holding my camera steady, either on the floor or, against a wall in a background or something that isn't going to be too problematic if I move slightly, and I layer all those shots as a triple exposure in camera, anything that didn't move from one shot to the next will be regular color, red, green, and blue color channels, layered, regular color. Anything that does move doesn't have the full red, green, and blue color channel of data to be natural, real colors. So if you move the couple like this, you get this against a white wall, you get magenta, yellow, cyan as an imprint. And against a black wall, you actually get red, green, and blue. You can kind of see this picture of the groom. He sort of starts to turn like a reddish color as he gets up here into the darker shadows. So that's all I did with this portrait of the groom standing here, walking up the steps, 1 step at a time. He just paused for the middle shot and paused for the one up here. And I was just balancing my camera on the ledge of that railing It's kind of wide. You can see it's like a wide railing. And yeah, is this making sense?
Was this a triple exposure, or like a double exposure?
Yeah, this is multiple exposure. This is three exposures layered.
Okay.
Most cameras, if they have multiple exposure in camera, the default is to layer 2 shots, but you can actually layer. I think on Nikon cameras you can layer up to 9, but for this you only need 3. You just need a red, a green, and a blue shot. And I can send maybe follow-up links or something to where I bought my filters. I bought them from a company in the UK that makes like optical glass, like high quality glass. They're like $120 each. They're kind of expensive, but they're just these big rectangular panels of color that are red, green, and blue. And so, yeah, that's what's going on. That's what happened with this shot. And this one, same thing. Just hold your camera as steady as possible so the background all aligns from one shot to the next, and then just have the couple step apart. This is the first time I tried it at a wedding, and I forgot. I wasn't thinking like, oh yeah, duh. The couple isn't going to be a solid in the shot anymore. They're going to be slightly opaque, 50, or I don't know the exact transparency, but they're going to be slightly transparent. And so anything in the background texture, if it's too dark or stands out too much, is going to go right through your couple. So I gave them like bullet holes right through the eyes here. So be conscious of like light, smooth textures. That tends to work well, like white walls, so that it's not too distracting, slicing through your couples or poking holes or something like that. Does that make sense? This one, again, probably not a good place to do it. I got really lucky that this line going through their face went right through the same spot on their face. Because if they had moved to the side and like the line went through her eye or her mouth or something really weird, it wouldn't have worked. Like I was very lucky that this line went right through their nose for every single shot. But yeah, that's what's happening.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
We have an interesting question.
Okay.
How do you ensure that a photograph was taken good? Like, how you get this question, right?
No, I don't. I'm trying to understand it. How to ensure that your photograph was taken good by yourself or viewers? Oh, I see. So how do I get a sense of if the photo is good? And do I put it out on social media to get feedback, or what? Is that what the question is? A lot of that is just taste and developing your own eye as a photographer. Some of it is social media, of course. Like it's nice when a photo does really, really well. That'll likely, if I get a photo that did way better than something most of what I put out, I will put it as a candidate for portfolio edition. But it'll surprise you. Some of my favorite photos just do crappy on social media, but you have to just listen to your own self. You have to listen to your own voice and your own mind. And if it's something you really love personally, then you absolutely need to share that and make it a meaningful part of what you do, because that's going to translate into other shots and other ideas you have. If you're doing something you love, like you'll likely do something again like that. And so you want to make sure that it's relevant in your body of work. But I don't lean too heavily on social media as like the measure of how good or bad a photo is. It's a lot of it's just from years and years of looking at hundreds of photos, thousands, millions of photos, and developing your sense of what you like and what you don't. That takes like 3 years to really do. If you're working almost daily, it takes a while. And it can be nice if you have like a local group, or if now, given our state with everybody kind of locked in at home, this is the perfect time to network again with a group on the internet, or if you have local friends that are also photographers, like sit down and critique each other's work. On my Patreon, I do like group critiques for people. They can submit their images to me, and I sit down with a Apple Pencil on my iPad and I mark them up, like what I think compositionally and lighting wise and expression wise and all of that. And it's really beneficial for those people to see their photos talked about by me. But honestly, I'm learning just as much. I'm sharpening the way that I see things by articulating it, like really sitting down and talking out loud about why you like a photo or not is super important, so important. And the vast majority of photographers never do it. And if not talking out loud, sitting down and typing and reflecting with actual words on paper, what you're seeing in a photo and why, almost like a journal if you want. It can be super valuable and really help kind of sharpen your eye. Anyway, looks like we have another photo or question. Do you ever have a situation like an attempted new experiment that didn't work as I expected, and later the client asked for those during deliver? Yep. Since we put so much effort during the new experiment, how do you navigate that? I totally understand. I get that a lot with night photos. Normally, we have a little bit of time for photos dedicated during the day, but I'll usually find clients during the reception at night just to say, hey, everybody's just dancing, having a good time. It's party mode. Will you come out with me for like 10 minutes to do a night portrait? Most people are totally fine with that. And so I take them out, and that moment of taking them away from the party and all that, like, you better believe they're going to remember and want to see that image. So the thing is, I never try and talk to clients too much about the technicality of what I'm doing. I just get really excited about it and say like, oh, this looks amazing. I never go into detail about what it is. I don't want to paint a picture in their mind or an expectation of what they think it's going to look like. I just get excited about being there. And if it's something that I see in the moment, like this is not working at all, like I'm just failing, it's bad idea, abort. I will probably take 1 or 2 safe photos to have as an answer for them. If they were like, hey, we spent 10 minutes outside at night, do you have anything? Like, yeah, I'll take a safe shot just in case. But if I see it in the moment and I think I'm onto something and it's really working, again, I don't try and show clients what my camera's going to look like. I keep that all. If a client does ask to see the picture, I always say like, no, I don't want to spoil the magic. I want them to get a sense of like, oh, okay, we're not going to look behind the curtain, just like a magician wouldn't want you to. So anyway, I again, if I'm getting the sense that I'm just failing completely, I might take a safe photo against that experiment. But the other thing is just not taking too much time. You don't want to take 40 minutes of their time and only have 5 photos to show them. Again, over time, you'll get a sense of how your creative push balances with your keepers. I know for me, I've been doing this almost 10 years. If I shoot an hour and a half engagement session, I'm going to shoot about 700 photos. I'm going to call that down to 150 deliverable. And of that, I might share 15 on my blog if I feel like blogging. Almost without fail, I'm like plus or minus, 15% in those averages. No matter where I'm shooting, no matter the personality of the couple, no matter what, that is generally my hit rate. But I wouldn't have been able to say that in my early years. It took me a long time to realize those kinds of numbers. And knowing that is really good. It's good to like reflect and look back on whatever data you have and get a sense of that. So you can, again, set those expectations during client meetings before you ever have them in front of your camera. Like, hey, I only need 20 minutes. You can expect this many photos and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, it kind of comes after time. Looks like we have another question. How do you manage when client gives their wedding extra long boring idea? Yeah, the boring ideas thing. So that tends to be something you experience more in the earlier days. If you don't have a very comprehensive portfolio, you're going to have a lot more, especially if clients are spending a little less money. They might be worried that they need to direct you more. Like you don't know what you're doing as much. So like, here's what we want from you. Please do this. If you don't have a comprehensive portfolio and if clients are on a lower budget, those tend to be more common. So as you charge more and maybe get clients that trust you a bit more as a professional, and as you have a more comprehensive dynamic portfolio, that tends to become less of an issue, just so you're aware. And if a client still does that anyway, I tend to be very receptive of it. I never try and make them feel guilty or self-conscious. I try and see it as a signal that, if they have a whole list of ideas, even if I think they're boring, that means they're invested in photography in general. At least I know that I'm not just like a vendor they're checking off on a box and I'm just there to be the service, you know. I try and see that perspective on it so that I'm not discouraged personally. And I try and, again, get them on the phone, or if you can do an engagement session ahead of time, talk through exactly what your approach is. And again, be receptive, but also push back a little bit with like, yeah, well, if we do the jump shot, that I think is really cheesy the way you want. If we do that, then can we also try this other thing that I want to try as a photographer? Instead of saying, no, let's not do that, that's cheesy. Then, you know, they're not, if you tell them like, no, I'm not going to do that, that's a boring idea, it's probably going to lead to them not being excited about whatever you want to suggest. Like, try and embrace it and then get it done as fast as you possibly can. And then say like, oh, and then can we try this? I had this idea myself. That buys you a little bit of goodwill, I think, with your clients. But everyone is different in how you need to manage them. So, you know, I maybe once a year I get a client who is totally coming from a different place that I have no idea why they hired me. And I just put my head down and do whatever they want. Now, again, if that's the situation I have with every single client, I need to assess what I'm putting out there to draw that bad personality in. You need to make adjustments in what you're showing with your portfolio or with your blogging or social media so that is an exception, not the rule. You do not want every client to be presenting you with boring ideas that you're not excited about. You're projecting something to make people feel like they should or can do that, or there's something in your work that's drawing those boring clients to you. So you kind of have to be aware of that. Yeah. I should have grabbed a water. My voice is starting to go. What was I going to do? Oh, I wanted to show, just scroll through sort of a full gallery. I think that might be kind of fun, just to see like what I delivered to the client to get a full sense of the day. Is that kind of cool? Is that a good idea?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Cool. All right, let me close that and find one. This is not prepared. I'm just going to go pick one.
Sure.
Go ahead and share my screen again. And let's do pick time. All right. Okay. See this? So these are almost all my client galleries. There's so many. Still buffering. Gosh. Not all of them, but a lot of them. It's probably 400 in here. Okay, so let's scroll through. What's a good wedding? I don't want to go too far back. The ones that are labeled offline just means that the clients. So one of the things I changed up this year was, and this is leveraged on the PickTime platform, which is what I use for my client galleries. What you're seeing right now is all PickTime. They have a fantastic app I made with them that could present and offer to my older client galleries the ability to keep their gallery online if they pay annually. You can set whatever price you want. I just set $60. That seemed pretty reasonable for my market and where I am in the country, in the US. $60 a year, they can keep their gallery online and it's safely backed up in the cloud. And so many clients just get like the zip file or like a USB key or whatever, and that's like so easy to lose track of. Even if they get a zip file to download, like clients will pop that in their iPhoto stream, they'll put it in Google Photos or something like that, and it gets so mixed up with everything else in their life. Like, it's so valuable to have your wedding photos in a separate, distinct spot that like is nicely organized. The link that you shared with other friends and family still works. They can access it. So for most people around here, I found that to be really great. They are definitely willing to spend $60 to keep it online, and they can cancel whenever they want. But in case you're wondering, like, why is that? Why are some of these grayed out? That's why. But here we go. So this one's kind of cool. This was a really difficult venue. This was in Chicago, which is a city I don't live in. I had never shot at the venue. I knew not much about it. Let's see here. Okay, all right. They walk you through how to use the gallery if it's your first time looking at it. Okay, we get it. There we go. So I'm just going to scroll. So it's front loaded with some of my favorites and my highlights. So I'll click through those just so you can see, like, these would be images that I would blog, something like that. Probably pick 20, 25 on my blog. And then you can keep that in the back of your head as I scroll through, what the full day looks like, what I, did most of the time, aside from these kind of more creative moments. This was a tricky venue because it was a planetarium. It's a museum, which was cool because of this one room, but the entire rest of the museum was really tricky and the light was very tough. It wasn't like a standard wedding venue that you would expect to shoot at. Okay, so those are all my favorites. That's them just leaving. I'll scroll medium speed, but I'll play around with like sort of creative, interesting framing for getting ready, but a lot of it's just, nice, clean, classic guys putting on their watch, putting on cufflinks. No need to really have a prism throughout all that. Picture of the salami. What's up? I don't know why, but there it is. But it's funny, even things that are kind of weird, like why would you take a picture of the salami? You have to think long term. What are clients going to be interested in 30 years from now, or what are their grandkids going to be interested? Like, I guarantee you an iPhone will be a foreign concept to them in the way that it looks here. Like, I try and take, as annoying as they are, a couple pictures of cell phones and the current technology and the way a Coke can looks, because the branding on Coke is probably going to be different in 20 years. And so, capturing, you're really creating like a time capsule of what the world is like in that state. It doesn't all have to be perfect, beautiful, everything's, awesome to a T. You can capture some of the natural state of the world. When people try and like immediately start cleaning up, especially during the getting ready photos, I'm like, no, you can leave that there. I'll just, it'll be in some of the photos in the background. But I don't make it look like a horrible picture, but here we go. So yeah, we just took the guys out. We got there first before the women arrived. So we just walked around the venue. It mostly was just on the very tip of a pier. The venue was there and then just water. So we just took pictures out by the water. Straightforward, grooms with groomsmen. 2 different spots for some full group photos. Usually try and get a shot of the groom with each of his groomsmen. And then I do the same thing with the bride with each of her bridesmaids, and then a group shot or 2 of them. And yeah. And this whole wedding was just me by myself. I did not have a second shooter or an assistant covering this. Oh no, come on. Let's go, buffer. There we go. Sorry. Taking a minute to catch up. But, oftentimes this is where I'm at when people are walking down the aisle. Crouch down opposite side of the groom so I'm not in his way, and just, capturing, don't lose sight. Like, it's, obviously you want to capture who's coming down the aisle first, but I'm hyper aware of anybody having like a decent emotional reaction in terms of like smiling, laughing from the crowd. Like, yeah, I don't know what the percentages are. I wouldn't be shocked if the majority of photos end up not having the couple in them across a full gallery. It's probably like the guests, not just the client. Sorry, I don't know why the buffer is slowing down here. I might refresh this if I need. This isn't fun. Here. Okay. This is actually a migrated gallery from my previous toast, which might be part of the issue here. I typically don't recommend, if you have a delivery system like this, like PicTime or some other gallery host, I don't recommend just gallery and then the full stream of images, because you can get buffering issues like this. And it's like such a pain to scroll all the way to the end. Like, how many times are people actually going to do that? I usually deliver it in parts. So it'll have the full gallery, and then it'll say part 1, part 2, part 3, however many parts are necessary, with about 200 images per part. Because I don't want to be dealing with exactly what we're dealing with here. Let's see if I can. I don't know what's happening. I'll pick a different newer gallery that isn't.
So a lot of times to load on the online galleries.
Yeah. Let's see if this is in parts. Yeah, it can be slow, and it doesn't help that I'm live streaming. I mean, that has up and down bandwidth that it's definitely taking. Make sure I've closed Dropbox. Come on. Let's try. That's funny. Now nothing's loading at all. That's the curse of live streaming, everyone. I'm so sorry. There's always that awkward thing that's not working the way that you planned. But not that I didn't even plan this, but I don't know why nothing's loading now. This is ridiculous. The other thing I'll try is maybe just a Chrome, because I just realized I was looking at those through Safari. But yeah, I definitely want to try and get this working real fast. I think it could be, especially once we get to the reception. And this is, I recommend all clients. What is this? All clients, before they hire their wedding photographer, make sure you look at a full gallery and pay special attention to the reception coverage, because a lot of photographers can put together a pretty good portfolio of, wedding portraits at sunset and getting ready photos in hotel rooms with big, beautiful windows, stuff like that. But the reception tends to be where consistently photographers fall apart the fastest, because all those tricky unknown variables of dealing with lighting. I don't shoot off-camera flash most of the time. Sorry, I'm getting my login password here. I shoot on-camera flash bounced over my shoulder, just because I like to be very flexible and able to move across the room very easily. And I always found when I try and set up lights, I tend to be locked into a zone that works really well. And then everything else kind of suffers if it's not in that zone. And with bounce flash, and some menus are easier than others in terms of feeling to bounce off of or not. But the vast majority of venues, I can bounce flash comfortably. And that's my preference, because that flash comes with me, and it has beautiful flattering light, whatever it bounces off of. And it can work really, really well. So that tends to be my take. I don't think we have time to get into, I don't have good examples for the technical aspects of bounce flash either. That takes a lot of practice, but just if you think and you're overwhelmed by other photographers saying you need this whole system with all these off-camera flashes, you can do that, but you don't have to be a successful full-time wedding photographer. There's all sorts of approaches to things. So, okay, let's see if this one. There we go. This one, this is actually a see, South Asian wedding of some kind. This has like a billion parts because it's so long. All right, let me share my other part of the screen. This was multi-day. Again, I shot this entire wedding by myself. I'll go a little faster in the beginning. But quick picks, again, leading with some of my favorites from this wedding. Gosh, hopefully the buffer doesn't get too bad. So they did a little ceremony at the bride's house ahead of time. Good Lord. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I don't know if this is going to work across live stream and download. It's not too bad, but the pixelation is annoying. Anyway, so they did, I don't remember exactly what this is called, but yeah, they kind of had their friends and family feed them and put paint, and they were covered in all these different colors and, and everything by the end of it. There was a videographer there I was working around, and it was very, very tight. My back was right up against the side of the house, this entire series of pictures. But again, I'm not using a prism that often. I'm mostly sensitive to reactions. I don't think we even did that many photos of them on this particular day because they weren't really dressed, the way they wanted to be for their wedding photos. I'm going to skip to the next day. This was in Delaware. So this was the next day was sort of like a 3-4 hour party with friends dancing. Their friends kind of dance in front of them. They had a lot of details. This is another sort of museum thing, which is pretty popular in the US. I don't know how popular it is where everybody is tuning in from, but to rent some sort of industrial museum or whatever is pretty common, but it's very tricky with lighting. You tend to get a lot of like hot spots with lights with, that industrial kind of harsh look, which is really tricky to capture flatteringly as a photographer. We did some quick photos out in front of the venue, and there was a bridge, an old abandoned kind of wall for an old bridge that wasn't used anymore. Just walked them over there to take some photos. Literally spent maybe 15 minutes doing these. And then they were right back to family and trying to do family photos. They had so many to go through on both days. But, with family photos, I put my head down and do as best I can, especially with the larger groups, just try and make sure everybody's not blinking. You don't have to do Brennizer methods or anything crazy. Let's see. Dang. I'm gonna see if I can skip to, unless I don't know if there are other questions while we're waiting for this to load. I wanted to skip to.
Do you take up a lot of Indian weddings?
I do, yeah. I do, probably a dozen per year. I shoot about 30-40 weddings a year, and about a dozen of them are probably Indian weddings. Yeah.
Okay. So we had another photographer. He goes by the name of Jared M. Gant. I think you should be knowing him. He's based out of US, Colorado.
Okay.
We asked him the same question. Like, how do you feel like shooting a Christian wedding and an Indian wedding, actually, in terms of timing or like whatever it is? Like, how do you feel?
Yeah. I wish these would load. This is really upsetting me. I'm gonna have to send PicTime a note.
Yeah, this is okay actually. I think it's not gonna load up properly, and bandwidth. I think the video camera is taking.
The differences are vast. I mean, obviously, I would say the majority of my couples have multiple days, which is not common for most American weddings, Christian or other religion wedding. Like they tend to do 8 hours and that's it. Most of my Indian weddings tend to be, like 2-3 days, usually 3 or 4 hours on like a Thursday, Friday. And then on Saturday, the big day, it's usually like 12 to 15 hours and an outfit change where they get ready we do a whole series of photos with family earlier in the day. And we do a whole series of photos with them and the family later in the day after they change. So it's just a lot more of everything. But structurally, it's not that tricky. There's the ceremony moments. I just document every action, I can't anticipate, and I don't think the couple even knows half of what's going on with the various ceremonies and stuff. So any like movement or action with their hands interacting with the ceremony stuff or with any flowers being put on them, I'm just constantly photographing that the whole time. And I get clients saying like often, we're worried like you haven't. First of all, at this point, I've done almost everything, every religion and ceremony you can imagine. But years ago, I remember people saying like, you haven't done this kind of ceremony before. Like, how are you going to know what to capture? It's like, you just capture everything. Every action that's occurring, I photograph. I don't just put my camera down and say like, I got it. I'm done. We're good. Like, no, I capture every action that's occurring. And I photographed entire wedding. I did a wedding in Brazil, and I don't speak Portuguese. That's what they speak in Brazil. Only the only person in the entire wedding that could speak English was the bride. And she was a wedding photographer herself. So she knew she wanted me in my work. So she took me all the way down to Brazil to photograph her wedding. And I photographed the entire wedding without speaking or understanding what anybody was doing, unless the bride told me. So it's totally possible. In fact, you're probably even more visually tied in to what's happening with you when you don't know what's coming next or can't understand the language or whatever. So I don't see that as a problem at all. As long as there's not like a huge surprise where like everything in the space flips on its head. Like I have had clients, like Chinese wedding, they had these dancers come out of nowhere and they had these big dragons and all this stuff. And I was not prepared for it with my bounce spots. I was shooting ambient light because it was more of a controlled situation. But as soon as these dancers came into the room, like I had to go run and grab my flash and throw that on. And because I needed bounce flash to cover the dance floor. I try and have them give me any heads up of surprises like that, but that's pretty rare. And outside of those situations, yeah, I can kind of cover anything. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. I have another question. I was not available for the entire session. I was like going on and off. So sorry, sorry about that. So see, people who are seeing this, actually, I saw Sam like blog, I think around 3 to 4 years ago, where he like gave away his secrets, and he told like, okay, so I tell what I do, what are my secrets, that is going to keep pushing me as a creative artist. So keeping that in mind, like how do you creatively motivate yourself? Actually, isn't it like it's going to be very tiring and you get mentally drained out over a period of time? How do you keep yourself creatively motivated?
Well, it comes in cycles. There's some days I feel very inspired and motivated, and other days or weeks where I'll go without anything. But part of the process of teaching other people what you do in photography is that does create motivation for me to continue into something new. If I still had never talked about prisming or didn't talk about the ring of fire, which I didn't even talk about today, but that's a piece of aluminum pipe I shoot through to get flare, right? If I didn't blog or talk about any of those things ever, I would probably still be doing those thinking like, I'm the only one that knows how to do this, blah, blah, blah. But not only is, given the nature of the internet these days, people are bound to eventually figure it out. Somebody's going to backwards engineer it, and then they'll take all the credit. So you want to be on the bleeding edge of just like, sharing with people so that they respect you and get excited to see what you're working on. But also it motivates me to move on to the next idea. And yes, I still use a prism occasionally, and the ring of fire and all the other things I talked about, I still do. But I don't exclusively do only that. And I don't, again, I don't rest on that as a stopping point. Like I figured it out. This is my thing. I'm done. Like, no, now I have a reason to move on to something else. And that plays out over and over again. And sometimes you'll get like new things back to back within the span of a month. You're like, oh my God, I have 2 totally exciting things to work on, but you need to space things out so that it can be represented across, a year's worth of your work in a variety of dynamic situations with different couples, different circumstances. And that way it becomes sort of a comprehensive, like fully formed idea. Don't just like, oh, I've got something this week. Boom, it's on TikTok. I'm sharing it, make me go viral. And then you have something the next week with the same thing. Like I like to slow drip things. And I've tried to position myself career-wise to have like a really long arc so that my career doesn't look like this. It's more like this. It's just a long path up. I don't know if that comes across in the camera. You want that. You don't want this, At the end of the day, I pay my bills from new wedding clients hiring me. I don't pay my bills from sharing and just selling workshops and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's a nice like side business, and I like giving stuff away for free as well. Like all that is great, but the bread and butter, all of that is predicated on me having wedding clients hiring me. And anything I do, I try and position for maximizing those people getting excited. And that's really like a multi-year way of thinking of things, not one week to the next, or forcing yourself to killing yourself to stay creative every single day. Like you don't have to, unless you work that way. But for me, it hasn't played out that way.
No, wedding photographers eventually will burn out.
That's the thing. Like you hear so many wedding photographers after, it's usually about year 3, and then it's like year 5, and then year 7, and then year 10. It's like every 2 or 3 years you hit a wall, and then you either get past it or you don't. And I want to stay doing this. And I'm grateful, so grateful that I'm still, I mean, I of course I have periods where I feel tired and I get stuck in a rut, but overall I'm 100% thrilled and excited to be at every wedding that I shoot. I've never felt like, oh, I've got to go do another one of these, kill me. Now I have felt like, oh my God, it's going to be 15 hours of coverage. I'm going to die, but I'm still grateful to be there. So.
Okay. It's a great piece of advice. Because most newcomers nowadays, actually, they come in and then they leave another 2-3 years. Actually, they don't really think long term like you do. So that's a
And
solid
that's
piece of
okay. I
advice.
mean, that's the cool thing about being a photographer. It can lead. It's such a great interception of kind of creativity and art and science and technology, right? They both kind of come together in photography and especially videography, where you have like the music layer of everything. That can lead to a lot of other fantastic pathways for you as a creative, smart person. And for some people, they're just not built for weddings. But I can't think of any other genre or style of shooting where not only do I get to be this creative and inventive, but also the photos are priceless to the people I'm making them for. You may get hired to do some big campaign for some company, and yeah, a lot of money is spent and it's really cool projects, but 5 years from now, literally nobody will care or remember it. But and if they do, it'll be totally like exceptional that they remember it, right? But with wedding photos, for a lifetime, photos that you made of that day are going to be cared about and remembered by somebody, and they're going to love them and see them probably daily. So yeah, that's hard to compete with, for sure.
Okay, Kiran, any other questions from your FB Live? I'll have to check mine as well.
The watch party, no, from my.
I like Kieran's. You don't see a lot of black and white live streamers. This is great. You've got a really nice and beautiful lighting. I was going to set up my nicer camera, but I fell behind on time, so I couldn't do it. But I'm jealous of your.
There's a real reason behind it. So I recently moved to Canada, so I don't have anything to set up. So the only thing I could pull off is a black and white. So I pulled it off.
That's cool. What part of Canada?
I'm in Edmonton.
Okay, cool. I haven't been there yet. Someday.
So yeah, 3 hours from 2 months, Calgary.
Got it. Yeah. I have been to Calgary. So, well, I love Canada. Someday, whenever the borders are open again, hopefully I'll come back.
Okay. Sam, I don't know if you have heard this question. Why did you choose to be a photographer?
Kind of fell into. That's a tough answer. Like my life choice sort of just made it happen in terms of I studied computer science in college, and I was planning to enter a job doing that kind of work. Came across a listing for photography, and I had been a photographer as purely a hobby since high school, when I was 16, 17 years old. And after college, I kept up through college, just photographing landscapes and stuff like that. I loved the technical aspects of photography more than anything. So I was really into landscapes and stuff. Like landscapes are naturally beautiful, and you can kind of obsess over the technical aspects of shooting still, but I'd never photographed people. I came across a job listing for a place in downtown DC called the National Press Club. And they are basically a venue for people to have press conferences in DC. And I interviewed with them, and they hired me to shoot daily. I was their staff photographer shooting press conferences, and that's where I started to photograph people more and more, and really become now obsessed with like the expressions and portraits of people more than anything. So that's what led me down the path. A coworker of mine was getting married. I'd never shot a wedding. She asked me to shoot it. I was like, sure, I'll try. And I fell in love with weddings, just for all the reasons we talked about previously. So yeah. And I do not offer wedding films. I see that question. No, videography, I basically stick to just for social media, Instagram, TV, stuff like that. For wedding work, it's too distracting from the process of what you do as a photographer. It is very rare to see somebody do both well. There's always going to be a trade-off, and I'm just not willing to make that yet. Maybe as technology evolves, and there could be a way to more easily blend both. It's doable, but there's also
do your clients specifically ask like we need photography as well as videography, or like you just say that no, I am just good at photography, so I don't don't take any freelancers or any other
I recommend somebody as a videographer, but I let the client book them as their own business separate from me.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
offer it under my umbrella, but maybe someday I would. But 9 times.
Okay.
Now I am doing more recently due to the smaller elopements where people didn't necessarily want to elope. So like obviously they have hundreds of friends and family that would have otherwise wanted to be there. I have been using the GoPro that I would normally mount to my camera to record for like deconstructions on Patreon and stuff. Now I'm using this and dumping the raw footage to my clients. So this is just a wide angle perspective on top of my main camera that I'm using. And I just give them the raw footage to do whatever they want with it. I figure that's better than nothing to give something to their hundreds of guests that would have otherwise been there. And people are really excited and receptive about this, even though it's not wedding films, it's just GoPro footage. But like I said, as technology, as these cameras or whatever get better and better, and I can just hit record and concentrate on what I want to do in the photography and the direction and the framing. I might do more video stuff. Is the big thing with video is the audio. Capturing good audio is so difficult, and having to mic people up and deal with wireless mics and batteries for all those is just such a layer of so many points of failure. I'm not quite ready to make that jump, but.
There's one more. There are two more questions. If you're okay answering that.
Sure. Yep. Who are my inspiring photographers? So I really love. I don't have the book here. Got a couple of their photo books around. One of my favorite is Nick Brandt, Brentizer. Ryan is great. Yeah, Ryan is a good photographer. But no, my favorite photographers tend to not be wedding photographers. Nick Brandt is one who I love. He does kind of fine art portraits of wildlife in Africa, and he's amazing. I've followed him for years. Another one is called Matt Stewart, and there's a couple of photographers with that name, but Matt Stewart is a street photographer in the UK. He does really amazing work. I own a couple of his prints, and I keep trying to buy his book, but it's always sold out. But he's fantastic. So Matt Stewart, Nick Brandt, I would look them up for sure.
I think this is the last question.
Oh, you may have not tuned in. I kind of got into that already, why I prefer in-camera effects over Photoshop. I'm not sure if we flagged where that was, but that was earlier in the conversation. And it's probably more valuable to see it there because it's within the context of stuff that I was deconstructing anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
I think that's about it. No more questions.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
I'm glad this went all right. Sorry, my galleries weren't loading at the end there, but it's kind of annoying. I literally can't. Okay. Oh, we got some pixelated stuff loading. Actually, that might be kind of cool to. Well, nah, it's not really. Well, I'll show you one. I'll leave with this final thing here. Oh, you can see my screen. Awesome. Yes. So here we go. I was photographing food. Blah blah blah. We popped out for literally like 2 minutes of photos against a. This was at nighttime, but it could have been at any time. Against a wall. That was me 5 minutes, and then boom, right back to reception coverage. Bride and groom went right into a toast. Yeah. So that's how quickly I'll spend with couples for like a night shot, real quick. Anyway, sorry, I can't show you apparently any more photos than that. Here we go. It's just not fun when they're not very pixelated, but all of these would be bounce flash. So no cameras on lights, or no lights on like a stand, just my bounce flash off camera. I can get it to load a little clearer. And then they have like purple lights or something from the DJs, I guess. I don't know. Cool. All right, guys. That's probably a good place to stop before I take a dive down trying to get buffering to not.
Yeah, I think that's about it. I think, Kiran, can we wrap up the broadcast?
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, Sam. Like, I was super excited to have you because I've been following you for a long time, and I thought, okay, the viewers downside in South have to see your works, and they also should get inspired. So that's the reason I just picked you.
Awesome.
Brought you in.
Well, I hope I helped with that.
Yeah. We met you in Silk. I don't know if you remember. Me and Kiran took a selfie with you. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So Silk 2018 in Bangalore, I think.
Yeah, let me know if you guys ever start doing conferences again over there. I want to come back. That was
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody.
You,
I appreciate it. Stay safe. Bye.
Yeah, just Sam, just stay back. I'm just ending the broadcast.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Bye, guys. Yeah.
Bye, friends. 1 minute. Pantingla.
Yep.
No.
Okay. So going on, the sessions will be only on Sundays, 8 p.m. So coming Sunday, we have another guest also we are bringing in. So every Sunday, do wait for us. We will be bringing in new photographers as well as big photographers to just have your portfolio or keep inspiring. That's it.
We love you. Okay.
End the broadcast. Done.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, we can.